Hello, thank you for joining us for this presentation of documenting post-contact archaeological sites in Oklahoma. I'm Christina Wyckoff. I'm the Section 106 coordinator at the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office, and I'm so glad you're here today. I'm going to pull up the presentation and turn off my camera. The biggest thing that I want to emphasize and highlight in this presentation is the importance of additional research for documenting post-contact archaeological sites. We have a great opportunity to provide additional context for these resources because of the nature um, of, of the resources themselves, and that we often have a lot of other documentation about occupations post-contact. So before you survey, make sure that you begin with background research and include a review of the archaeological site files, whether you're going to the Oklahoma Archeological Survey or accessing them through their online platform. Also review the National Register of Historic Places files, centennial farms, which are available on our website, historic maps and historic aerials, land patents, allotment records, regional and local histories. So again, archaeological site files, you can review those in person in Norman at the Oklahoma Archeological Survey, or you can contact the Archaeological Survey about ways to access their online system. National Register of Historic Places, you can review these files on our website. You can review National Register locations that are not restricted in our interactive map, which in my little inset picture you can see is the top icon when you go to our National Register of Historic Places page at okhistory.org. You can also review the National Register database in the icon immediately below. You can review existing resources that have been documented in the Oklahoma Landmarks Inventory. At this time, you would be reviewing those via the database on the website, and you would have to search by property. However, in the near future, when we roll out our online portal, that information will be available in map form, so you'll be able to see those resources adjacent to your project on a map. Also, some of the National Register files copies of them are available in the Archaeological Survey, and others we have on file here. So if you have an archaeological National Register nomination that you would like to review for your project and it's not available on the website, you can come in person and view that documentation here. Centennial Farms and Ranches. The Centennial Farm and Ranch program is headed by Shay Otley in our office. It's an opportunity for folks who have whose families have maintained their property as a farm and ranch for at least 100 years to have some recognition. And also, these locations, we know that the same families have occupied them for an extended period of time, and you should be looking at this to see if there's a known location where there may be archaeological deposits that would be associated with that long-term occupation. There are tons of historic maps available online. You can review lots of USGS topographic quadrangles at TopoView. You can review soil survey maps, allotment maps, fire insurance maps, Sanborn's and Clarkson maps. All of these are available easily online, and I'm going to flip through where you can find those. General Land Office maps are available through the Bureau of Land Management's website, GLO. Maps and patent information are both available through the Bureau of Land Management. So you can you can search for your township range and you can download the map, you can view the map, you can see if there are any occupations in the area of your project or your site. If you've already identified a site at that time, you can potentially find the patent for that property. You can compare that to WPA land ownership maps, which don't typically have buildings, or they don't typically have buildings illustrated, but you can compare land ownership over time to see if you've got continuous or what may appear to be a continuous occupation by the same owners. You can review historic aerials through the Corporation Commission. Actually has a new website or a new map, new to me anyway. Let me actually show that to you right now here. So I'm going to share my screen with you for just a moment. So this is the Oklahoma Corporation Commission website. If you go to their divisions tab, oil and gas conservation, and then scroll down, you can you can use their Oklahoma Corporation Commission aerial photo viewer. This used to be the historic aerials of Oklahoma database, and now it's available in this format. So I just wanted to show you where that was, and we will stop sharing that screen. This and return to the presentation. You can also find historic aerials through shareok.org, historicaerials.com. Also, the Oklahoma Geological Survey has aerials available. You can find them in numerous libraries, including the Oklahoma Department of Libraries, where you can review hard copies of those images if it's hard to see a digital copy. Remember, before you're surveying, if a previously identified archaeological site is within your project area, make sure you're coordinating with our office or with the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey regarding your proposed methods, and consider the background research that you do ahead of your field work so that you're developing appropriate field investigations given the likely properties and resources that you may encounter. At this point, I just want to point out that not every resource may be best documented on an archaeological site survey form. The really critical thing is that we're documenting historic resources in ways that will be useful. So if you are documenting, if you encounter a resource, think about what the resource is, what information you can record on that resource, and how that resource can best be identified in the future. So if you have a house, that might best be documented on a historic preservation resource identification form. That form includes a lot of information specific to buildings. So information you would be documenting on an HPRI form would be more granular than information you might place in an archaeological site survey form. However, you may have more than just a house at your resource. You may have multiple buildings, you may have additional features, foundations, well, buried deposits, surface scatter of artifacts, etc. In which case, you would likely need to be documenting the standing structures on historic preservation resource identification forms, but then the site as a whole on an Oklahoma Archaeological Site Survey form. and make sure that you are cross-referencing that information where possible. If you have a bridge, some bridges have been documented on archaeological site survey forms in the past, but a bridge is likely better documented on an Oklahoma Historic Bridge Inventory form. Again, a bridge could be part of a larger site and you might want to document your resource using multiple forms. There are isolated find forms for more minor resources or resources that don't have that aren't clearly associated with something, but you want to note that you found these materials in your project area and that you have addressed them. So an isolated find form may be the best way to do that. And then again, there's always an Oklahoma Archaeological Site Survey form. And if you're uncertain, err on the side of caution. Certainly, more documentation is better. So if you are on the fence about whether you should document something as an isolated find or an archaeological site, then go ahead and fill out that archaeological site survey form. And if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to our office. You can call me. You can reach out to the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey, and we're happy to provide guidance. This is an example of a couple of built environment resources associated with a lake. They were built by the WPA, and they're documented on a historic preservation resource identification form. They're also visible in modern aerials and historic maps and aerials. This is a power pole that was in a field not associated with any occupation. It was loosely associated with some oil and gas resource extraction in the past, but not even with any buildings. There were no buildings associated with that use even. And so this I recommended just be documented on an isolated find. This is an archaeological site. This is a church site. You can see the stem wall that remains. There were also buried deposits elsewhere on the site. There's a standing vestibule that was built later that houses a lovely museum. This is in the community of Zion. And so this resource is documented on an archaeological site survey form. So documenting your site. If you're documenting an archaeological site, you're wanting to complete that archaeological site survey form. You should be providing maps in addition to the form, a sketch map. And by a sketch map, I mean a map that illustrates the various resources within the site and their proximity to one another. And a topo map illustrating the location so that information can be provided to the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey. If you're completing this map using the new system, then you're already one step ahead of me, so that's great. Also, make sure you're including photographs in your documentation of sites, and those should include site overviews, photographs of features, photographs of diagnostic artifacts, and representative photographs of non-diagnostic artifacts. Provide a clear explanation of the archaeological methods and document your shovel tests. And you should document those in both map and on the form, or even in a spreadsheet, depending on what you're finding. You also need to be including your archival research and chain of title in the site form document if you are documenting the owners of the site. So what should be in your site form? Answers to all of the obvious questions: who, what, why, when, and where. And then remember to provide citations to demonstrate how you know the information that you're putting in the site form. Make sure that you're including maps and photographs that illustrate the site dimensions. Use red. The Oklahoma Archaeological Survey has asked that red is used to illustrate the site location and the boundaries of the site, and illustrate the location of all the site features and artifact concentrations. Illustrate the site condition. Make sure that your photographs show what the condition of the site is. And if it's an update, that your photographs, well, if there were photographs provided for the initial submittal of the site, that your photos are can be compared to those to show any change in condition, or if the condition of the site is the same. Include photographs of the site area and, again, all site features, and diagnostic and representative photos of artifacts. Make sure your legal location information is provided. There are clear site dimensions and the boundaries are clear, and clarify how those boundaries were delineated and your confidence in them. And if you have an archaeological site that you have identified in a project corridor, for instance, by artifacts that you located in some shovel tests, and you have identified what you might call a boundary based on a couple of negative shovel tests, but you sort of zoom out and see that outside of your project boundary, there's an existing or the remains of a farmstead, and you can tell that it is very likely that these artifacts that you're identifying are associated with that occupation. You can state that in your site form. You can clarify that you believe these artifacts are associated with a site that is outside of your project and outside of your scope of work. But and that would be preferable to identifying a small scatter of artifacts as a unique trinomial and indicating that that's the complete boundary, that those are the complete dimensions of your site. So that's providing that additional context that makes that information more valuable, and still demonstrates probably that there is a lack of integrity in your project, or may well indicate that there's a lack of integrity in your project location, but it doesn't pretend that the remaining features or remaining deposits of the site that you have not fully investigated are not there. It acknowledges their likely presence. When you're indicating, please do indicate the occupation of your site, the temporal occupation of your site, and use maps, aerial photographs, and archival research to support that period of occupation or use. If you can, indicate who the site is associated with, whether that's the property owner based on archival research, or whether it's association with a particular community, which perhaps could be determined through cultural affiliation of the materials, or based on the location of your site within the surrounding context. And again, provide support for justify those claims, and cite your resources in the site form so that that can be reviewed in the future. And make sure that you are careful about your cultural affiliation. So just because you have not identified that or confirmed an association with a particular tribe does not mean that your site is historic non-Indian. I think that there's room for improvement on the cultural affiliation portion of our site so that we can get more meaningful data from them in the future. But at this time, please provide as much justification as you can for the association of the site. And if you can't determine an association, say so rather than checking one of these boxes, or check both boxes if that's the best option that you could come up could check historic non-Indian, historic Indian, although that still leaves gaps. Make sure you're clarifying how you're coming up with cultural affiliation, and note that there are a lot of great resources on the Oklahoma Historical Society's website. You can review city directories, newspaper records, genealogy records, right through the online catalog. And this is just a link to the Research Center's page of the Oklahoma Historical Society website. So again, number 5 in the archaeological site form, in the paper form, and number 6 for cultural affiliation and historic phase identification are not perfect. And so please consider, when you're documenting a site, how are we indicating if you are recording a resource that's associated with an all-Black town, for instance, or a freedmen homestead community or cemetery, or another significant Black or African American site, because we do not have a checkbox to indicate those associations. So because we can't indicate that in our checkboxes, please find a way to incorporate that information in the text fields. For instance, in the site description. It should definitely be in the site description. Some other resources that might be useful for researching persons associated with your post-contact site. Laura Martin gave a lovely presentation about secrets of the OHS Research Library. That link is available on our YouTube. Well, that video is available on the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office's YouTube page. Also, Turning Records into an Archive, a reflection on the Oklahoma Black Homesteader Project, which was a lunch and learn presentation by Dr. Kalenda Eaton at the University of Oklahoma, is available on our website. And Finding the Girls, Records for Researching Women, will be available. That presentation will occur, I should say, Wednesday, June 21st at noon. So we hope you'll join us for that. Again, I mentioned Dr. Kalenda Eaton and the Oklahoma Black Homesteader Project. They have a website. They're collecting information about Black homesteaders in Oklahoma. There's also the Freedmen's Bureau Search Portal. Make sure that when you're documenting your site, you are considering if persons associated with the site were significant to local, state, or national history. To do that, you need to be researching the property owners and the known occupants. And also be attentive to whether the site is associated with the community who should be consulted on the potential significance of the resource. Maybe you and maybe our office and maybe the archaeological, well, maybe our office is not able to comment on the significance of a person to a given community, but that community would be able to provide more information. Make sure that it's clear from your site form what the site represents, what is the site type, and what purpose the site served. And again, support and cite your resources. That information can be included and should be included in the site description. So again, site description, include the site location, the dimensions, any features, any notable artifacts, summarize all of the artifacts, note the integrity of the remaining features, whether artifact deposits are intact, what the depth of archaeological deposits is at the site. Include a discussion of the site occupants and persons, for example, an allottee, other owners or occupants, or the patent recipient. And don't forget to include a chain of title with a site form if you are documenting if you are doing archival research. There may be situations where you'll be documenting an archaeological site without doing that archival research, and I acknowledge that. State when the site would have been occupied or used, and reference the maps, aerials, records, etc., that support those determinations. Make sure that you're acknowledging that significance and integrity are separate. They both need to be considered in order to determine the eligibility of an archaeological site for the National Register. Integrity describes the quality of information contained in an archaeological property. Integrity is not an absolute quality of a property. Integrity is relative to the significance. For properties eligible under criterion D, integrity relates directly to the types of research questions defined within the research design. So for significance, we have criterion A, events, criterion B, persons, criterion C, architecture, engineering, criterion D, yielded or likely to yield important information. And then integrity, does the resource still convey its significance? And consider the location, design, settings, material, workmanship, feeling, and association. Make sure you're providing and supporting a site eligibility assessment in your documentation. And remember to consider criteria beyond criterion B or criterion D rather when you're discussing your archaeological site. If you have questions about significance and integrity, please do also review Dr. Matthew Pierce's presentations on the National Register and historic properties. Again, make sure you're illustrating your site on a 7.5 minute USGS topographic quadrangle or drawing it directly into the online portal. Make sure that you're providing a site sketch map illustrating features, testing locations, and surface artifacts, and that you're providing a datum or other clear point of reference. Sometimes the site may be documented adjacent to a roadway, for instance, prior to a road project where the road may be widened, and then the distances from the previous road may be more challenging to determine after that new road is built. So providing a datum resolves that potential issue. Make sure you're providing overview photos, feature photos, and artifact photos. Please review the guidance on maps and photographs provided by the National Park Service in Bulletin number 36, and here's a link to that attached. Sketch maps can be very valuable when produced well, and not as valuable when they're like the one on the left. Here's another sketch map that's illustrating the project location. It has street names, it has features identified, shovel testing locations identified, etc. So that you can compare this map to the information in the site description and clearly see where all of these resources are and where they are in relation to one another. Ultimately, we want to produce a useful record, and we can do that by including citations and locations of maps or aerials that will facilitate future review and future research associated with this site or a context of sites. If you're including the chain of title, others can confirm or assess for themselves whether significant persons may have been associated with the site. And if you're including clear maps, photos, and illustrations, then you have documented the appearance of the site at the time of your work so that it can be compared in the future. Good documentation of a archaeological site means you're investigating the potential significance of the site, you're supporting the presence or lack of integrity, and you're providing a clear description of what the resource is and good illustrations to demonstrate that description. Matt and I, as I mentioned, provided a lunch and learn presentation on completing these forms, the HPRI form and site forms, for our office's review. And this is a link to that video. I've also attached annotated site forms with I've attached some handouts, including that annotated site form with links, an archaeological research resource checklist, an archaeological site photo checklist, and map templates. And I can quickly show you that annotated site form. It's the old Oklahoma Archaeological Survey site form with annotations and hyperlinks. So it has links to where you might find certain types of information and additional clarification about what should be included in the various sections. It also includes links to the National Register Bulletin number 36, specifically under site significance and integrity. And I've also included, let's see, this checklist of resources and some map templates that had been requested in the past, illustrating information that should be included on your map. And let's see, for various types of maps, for instance, sites that have features or a location map showing the project location and your site location. And these are all just invented. These are not real sites. I've just drawn these to be examples. And let's see. So this is just to let you know that our office is updating our state plan. We're in the process of updating that plan, and we currently have a 5-year plan. We're looking to transition to a 10-year plan, and the first questionnaire relating to our plan will be available for public responses in July of 2023. It'll be available at okhistory.org/SHPO/state plan. And we are hoping to get your feedback there. I also have dropped a question in the sidebar under polls that says, would you like to see updated guidance relating to archaeological sites included in our state plan? And so if anybody, if you could answer that question, yes, no, or no opinion, that would be lovely. I'd really appreciate your feedback. Can you see that poll on the right-hand side of your screen? All right. Does anybody have any questions? This is everything I have for my presentation. Do you have any questions or things that you would like to discuss?